Nearly 2 years ago, I made a video called Living in Oklahoma Pros and Cons. And I know a lot of you are on my channel, watching my channel almost every week. Thank you so much because of that video. At this point, it has about 36,000 views, and I'm really grateful that you guys find that information so helpful. So I wanted to return to that video, kind of address some of the commenters who came at me about various things. It wasn't anything crazy, so thanks so much for that. And then add some things in that I thought I needed to. If this is your first time watching my channel, welcome. Thanks so much for joining. I'm Marcie Billen, and I'm a real estate agent in the Oklahoma City metro. I live in Norman specifically. So my entire life, I've lived in Oklahoma. I haven't lived anywhere else. I've traveled a lot. So I grew up in a little town called Claremont, which is outside of Tulsa. And now I live in Norman. And Norman is just south of the Oklahoma City metro. We're Southsiders, as they call us. And I've lived here since 2007. So the first thing that people took some issue with me in my first video in Living in Oklahoma Pros and Cons was whenever I was talking about, what part of the United States Oklahoma is. This is a really typical conversation for Oklahomans, which is hysterical. I say we're not Midwestern or the South, mostly because culturally, I think, this is my opinion, that we're very different from those two regions. You may disagree with me, that's okay. So Oklahoma is smack dab in the middle of this country, right? Heart and soul of the US. When I talk about culture, I'm talking about the fact that a lot of the southern states, were states before 1907, that's our statehood year. And then Midwestern states had, different issues than Oklahoma did as well. So I've seen people refer to Oklahoma as the Southwest, Central, and then sometimes the South, depending on where you're from, I think. I think if you're from Southeast Oklahoma, then you feel like you're from the South, and that makes total sense to me. But here's my take. I think that if you're from Eastern Oklahoma, that, your land looks more like it does in Arkansas. Arkansas is a little more hilly, more forested. Even culturally, some of the things that you say are gonna be more like Arkansas, so that's a little more south and a little more central, right, to the US. Now, if you're from Western Oklahoma, I feel like we're the Southwest. I really feel like Oklahoma is so split. We're so different on either side of the state. So definitely want to hear your take in the comments if you want to leave that for me. Thanks so much. So in my original video, the first con for living in Oklahoma that I talked about was the seasons. So we have really harsh seasons, 4 very distinct seasons as well. So since making that video, which that was at the beginning of the panorama, we have had some interesting weather. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit because that's really typical for Oklahoma to have interesting weather. So October of 2020, me and my husband walked out of our house on this fateful morning, and we knew that, it had iced overnight. When we say ice, we don't mean snow. There's no snow involved. It's rain that falls from the sky and freezes on the way down, and so it'll coat the trees, right? That's our ice storms. So when we walked out of the house that morning, we stood under our porch. We saw all of our neighbors under their porches too, and we were just all watching tree limbs break off of trees. It sounded like gunfire, and I've heard it before. It wasn't new. This happens in my lifetime, in my experience, has happened about once every 10 years. So I remember a major ice storm in 2007, 2008. And then I remember one whenever I was in high school, I think maybe even junior high, I'm not positive on that, where the ground is just coated with ice and there's not a good way to get rid of it. My dad could take the tractor and push some of it off, but until it warms up, it's icy, right? Another interesting bit of weather that we had is in February of 2021, we had a cold snap. A cold snap is kind of a weird way to say it, but that's what we call it. So it was a week in February, I think it was around Valentine's Day, if I remember correctly, where the temperature did not get above 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That is very cold for us. You guys may have seen this in the news, especially in relationship to Texas. Oklahoma was hit hard. Texas had different issues than Oklahoma had during that situation. So it's not normal for us. To be that cold for a week it was pretty unbearable, but that's the only time. I don't remember that happening before in my life. Okay, and then in April 2021, we had this hailstorm to end all hailstorms. So I was in the shower actually when it happened, and I thought someone was like bombing our house. That's what it sounded like. When I ran out into the living room, the hail had come through my windows and there was hail on the floor, even on my couch. So we all had new roofs and new windows, not all new windows, but the ones that were broken at that time. So it was pretty scary. Also not a truly normal occurrence. Usually like our hailstorms like have smaller hail pieces. This one just had really big ones. That's why it was so bad. So a couple of people mentioned that I said that we don't get snow in the first video. And I did say that. I did say that we don't get snow, because to me and all the people that I know that live like in Michigan and Wisconsin and even New York, like all these places, they get snow that stays on the ground. And that's what I was trying to say. We do not get snow that stays on the ground. Like 3 or 4 days, maybe in piles of 2 weeks when it's really disgusting. But we're not digging ourselves out of snow. In the past, I feel like 5 years, it's snowed like maybe once or twice per winter. So that's what I mean when I say it really doesn't snow. Now, do schools close and everything? Yeah, 100%. But it really doesn't snow like we're gonna see in the northern part of the US. The second con that I mentioned in my original video was about roads. We do have a lot of toll roads, meaning you have to pay to drive on them every single time you drive on them. That's really not changed. We did have another one open up, but that's actually been a really helpful toll road. One thing that I did mention in my original video that people got a little grumbly about was I said that our state is big, that Oklahoma is a big state. So I get it. If you live in Texas or you live in Alaska or California, the other states that are bigger than us, I mean, there's quite a few. Oklahoma is the 20th largest state in the union. So I get it. We're not the biggest, but we're not the smallest either. And what I kind of mean by this is like, I have to drive 2 hours from where I live in Norman to leave the state. In any direction, it doesn't matter. Like I am smack dab in the center of this thing. So that's one of the things, that's why I said that. We are a big state. It takes a little while to get out of it. We have vast improvements in our airports. You'll be able to get to some places very quickly, which is amazing. I love that. I just traveled to Peru. It only took me like 8.5 hours from Oklahoma City, so that's exciting. Really good travel situation there. It does take around 7 hours to get to a beach, and whenever I say a beach, we're talking about Galveston, which is the Gulf of Mexico. So, to go to Gulf Shores or to go to Florida, it's much further to drive. And a lot of people do make that drive every year. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the pros. So the first pro that I talked about in my original video was sports. Some of you didn't think sports was a pro, which I get because I'm not a sports person myself, believe me. But it is an activity that people here enjoy, and it can be fun if you're with your friends, right? So we talked about basketball, football, which is a big thing, college football especially, and then we talked about rodeo a little bit. The thing that I felt bad for not mentioning was actually softball. So softball is a big deal here, like high school, college. A lot of my friends, I don't go typically, but a lot of my friends will go to OU softball games. A lot of people I know will actually go to the NCAA World Series for softball, which is held in Oklahoma City every single year. And another one that I didn't mention that I think is a lot of fun is actually gymnastics. So University of Oklahoma Gymnastics is a pretty big deal. I've had, people from that program go to the Olympics. It's really amazing. And those meets can be pretty low key. You don't have to deal with traffic and all that stuff. It can be really exciting. So that's another sport that I really hated that I didn't mention in the first video. Another pro that I mentioned in the original video is the cost of living. And we talked at length about the cost of housing, and I've made videos about the cost of housing in Oklahoma. The one thing I didn't talk about, which I wanted to bring up because it's a con, is the cost of healthcare. So whenever I did my research on the cost of healthcare in Oklahoma, it's actually above the national average. Now, does it even out with the cost of living? Probably, just depending on, what kind of healthcare needs we're looking at here. But it is above average in the nation for cost of healthcare. Are you thinking about relocating to Oklahoma, moving here, or maybe even relocating within the state? I do have some free relocation guides that you can download for Oklahoma City, Norman, and some other towns. So you can find the links to those in the description below. You can also go to my website here and see a bunch of that information as well. Another pro that I had mentioned originally is Brahms. So Brahms is a business that's a dairy farm, and then they have stores with like ice cream and then a market, of course, too. And these are located mostly in Oklahoma. They're within 3 hours of any one of their dairy farms. So Brahms is great. Everyone says like, yes, I'm definitely going to Brahms when I go home to Oklahoma. I would do the same thing. Another place that people love to mention that's becoming more popular, and we're getting one in Oklahoma City, so everyone's really excited, is Quick Trip. So this is an Oklahoma-based company, and Quick Trip is a convenience store. It's a gas station. So I know it doesn't sound like anything, but I had friends growing up that was their first trip, like after school every day, like we're going to Quick Trip to get a snack, to get a treat. It's a great place to work. I know it's in the top 100 of employers of Oklahoma, maybe even the nation. I'm really not sure on that, so you'll have to look that one up for me. Quick Trip is a really cool spot, and we are getting one in Oklahoma City. They're all over northeastern Oklahoma, which is why I wanted to mention it. So space is another pro for Oklahoma. I mentioned this in my original video, and I wanted to elaborate on this a little bit as I'm seeing more and more people relocate here, and I'm helping more and more people relocate here. So Oklahoma became a state in 1907. It wasn't very long ago compared to some other states. We are the 46th state to join the union. So we're pretty lagging in terms of developing our land, and we have a lot of land. So there are still large farms and ranches that are in operation in Oklahoma. There's large pieces of empty space. Oklahoma City itself is huge. If you look at a map, I mean, it just covers an enormous amount of space. So there's been quite a bit of land come available for purchase since the beginning of the panorama. And me and my husband were just driving around southeastern Oklahoma City the other day. So kind of here on the map where you're seeing. So it looks like it would be city, but it's definitely not. There's nothing out there at the moment. So what they're doing is breaking up these larger pieces of land into 1 acre, 5 acre, and 10 acre parcels. These seem to be really popular for people to want to build a beautiful home on, so that they can have a little bit of space just for themselves. So glad you watched this video. I would definitely encourage you to watch this one next. Thanks so much.